Welcome to our study of, well, presently it's Sacred Outlook, the practice of Vajrayana, which is an extension of our study of Journey Without Goal, and really takes this study of Journey Without Goal into a much more applied and contextual situation where we get some sense of the application of what we have in Journey Without Goal, and particularly this time it's going to become very personal in the sense of Chögyam Trungpa very much talking from the point of view of the student that actually engages with the practice of Vajrayana, receiving Abhisheka and what this implies and so forth. So we've covered some of the grounds in terms of understanding the context of the Vajrayana practice, of Vajrayana in general, the 5 Buddha families and so on, in relation to, well, obviously in relation to our own journey, but also in relation to the general Buddhist teaching. So, so this is such a valuable instruction. But as always, we'll begin again going back to Journey Without Goal, where there's a at the beginning of Journey Without Goal, there's the devotional liturgy, which is really like a pith instruction, and yeah, it's a pith instruction, but it's also a practice. Chanting this is a practice. It's invoking truth and aspiring to truth, and invoking the teachers of the 8 chariots, of what we call the practice lineage. Then we proceed to aspiring, really enumerating the aspirations we have in terms of the path, and also very much highlighting our own shortcomings, which, as I've repeatedly said, then this is such a key element really of the journey, that we're willing to actually identify our shortcomings, simply because they're not what we truly are. So we don't really need to have any embarrassment about our shortcomings, even though that's suitable too, but it's not as if we have a during predicament. We don't have something that is lasting condition, something that can be worked with. Anyway, Jamku Kongtrul writes, "The Guru is Buddha in person, but I regard him as an ordinary man. I forget his kindness in giving profound instructions. When he doesn't do what I want, I lose heart. His actions and behavior are clouded over by my doubts and disbelief. Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that unobscured devotion will increase." So the problem lies in us objectifying the Guru as an ordinary person. And there's nothing wrong in that. We're legally entitled to do that. But we've actually, if we're engaging with the Guru as a Guru, then it's very different. Actually, I think it's in cutting through in the chapter called Initiation. Trungpa Rinpoche, he says, he's sort of just speculating. He says, what if people met me at a diner on the highway and just saw me as an ordinary person? Then they might hear that I'm the incarnation of the Trungpa Tuku from Tibet. Then it might become, they might perceive me as somebody very exotic. But until then, I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not getting it quite right. But he says something about the juxtaposition between, you could say, the exotic nature of a guru and the general perception of the teacher. And that's where we tend to basically project onto the teacher all sorts of fantasies and so forth. So with the practice of guru devotion, we're not talking about going into a fantasy, but we are talking about how on the path, when we are practitioners, then of course we rely on our own efforts, our own application, our own discipline, but we also rely on the living Dharma. We have the Dharma of theory, the heritage of all the sutras and the commentaries, the pith instructions from 2,500 years of Dharma, Buddha Dharma. But the real value of the Buddhist teachings lies in what we call the Dharma of realization. So we have the Dharma of transmission, and then we have the Dharma of realization. And the Dharma of realization is far more important, because that's where we don't just have a lot of do-it-yourself manuals, but we have persons who actually have the experience, have gone through what we're going through, who have come out with realization, who have emerged following the example of the Buddha in eliminating confusion and bringing forth realization. And so we have in all over Buddhism, we have this veneration or the respect for those that show us the path. But in the Vajrayana being the resultant vehicle, where we very much operate with the notion of enlightenment as already being something spontaneously present, the teacher is not seen as merely an external person, but is seen as the embodiment of enlightenment. And from that point of view, then, the teacher is not just an ordinary person. And we would say the accomplishment of the Vajrayana path depends entirely on our devotion to the teacher. Chögyam Rinpoche, he quotes in his Mountain Dharma, accomplishments follows after devotion to the teacher. So we make a big mistake if we fixate on aspects of the teacher that we can identify as just being an ordinary person, or we perceive as an ordinary person. Then we're missing what the teacher truly is, and the relationship with the teacher becomes just an ordinary relationship. And we would generally say that the teacher being an authentic teacher, and that's the premise here, is somebody who has genuine realization. And that's why we would say that the Buddha and the teacher are no difference in terms of realization. But we would say the teacher exceeds the Buddha in terms of kindness, because the teacher is actually here in this present world relating to us. Like Tsongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, somebody would say, like Tsongsa Khyentse Rinpoche would say, it's somebody who, just like us, likes particular foods that have particular tastes. We can relate to the teacher as being part of our world. And yet the teacher, at the same time, as you could almost say, pretending, masquerading as being an ordinary person, and very often sort of highlights their own shortcomings and foibles and so on. The teacher is enlightenment. We asked for enlightenment. Enlightenment has manifested. And that's where the teacher then is particularly kind to us. That's where we then would say, I forget his kindness in giving profound instructions. When he doesn't do what I want, I lose heart. This of course happens when the student comes to the teacher. There's very often a honeymoon where the student is seeing the teacher as being absolutely wonderful. But then when the teacher begins to, you could say, tickle or work with or challenge the student's obscurations, and the teacher does that because the teacher has a lot of trust and devotion in the student and sees the potential of the student. And that's where the teacher is very happy to touch on the student's insecurities, simply because they are necessary. The student could very well let go of these. The teacher trusts that the student can let go of these shortcomings, fixations, and so forth. So there's very much the relationship that the student is a bit like a prodigy. Somebody has tremendous talent, and the teacher is very dedicated to the student and the student's sanity, and sometimes challenges the student when the student indulges in his or her own habitual insanity. So that's where the student then might lose heart, thinking, the teacher's not doing what I want. I'd like to hang out with the teacher all the time. I'd like to be a VIP in the guru's court, and so forth. So that might happen incidentally, maybe for a short time, but that's where then if that doesn't happen continually, then we might lose heart. So we're basically sort of exposing this unnecessary baggage that we drag along, which actually hinders us to really appreciate and really connect and meet with the teacher. His actions and behavior are clouded over by my doubts and disbelief. Basically, I project onto the teacher's, say, manners or style. So, having enumerated these shortcomings, then we supplicate the teacher, Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that unobscured devotion will increase. So, we might not have devotion, and then we simply say to the teacher, I supplicate you, bless me that I may have devotion. So here Jamgon Kongtrul supplicating the teacher really as that which is true, and which we say right from the start of the path, we are approaching truth, and the teacher does embody truth for us. And so despite our sort of superficial, passing, temporary, confused manners, then at the end of the day, we do trust the teacher, and we invoke the teacher to eliminate these obscurations. So it says, my own mind is the Buddha, but I never realized this. Discursive thoughts are the Dharmakaya, but I don't realize this. This is the unfabricated innate state, but I cannot keep to this. Naturalness is things as they really are, but I have no conviction in this. Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that my mind will be spontaneously liberated. By the way, I forgot to say, today is a very special day. Today is what in Tibetan is known as Sagadawa Duchen, and it's the fourth lunar month in the Tibetan calendar. In other Buddhist traditions, this month is known as Vesak, and it's in this month that the Buddha was born, on the 8th day of the lunar month, and today on the full moon of the lunar month, then is when the Buddha attained enlightenment. Well, actually, it's the day that he renounced. So we say it's the day he cut his hair. It's also the day he attained enlightenment. It's the day that he entered into nirvana. So this is a special day. And also here in Australia, there's going to be a blood full moon, a particular sort of phenomenon happening tonight. And also we'll be doing a practice here later on. It's not connected with this link here, but if you're on the Siddhartha's Intent Australia mailing list, you would have received the Zoom link. And we'll be doing a practice from Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche, who's a great 19th and 20th century master who wrote a beautiful liturgy invoking the Buddha. So we'll do that afterwards. Anyway, today being the full moon of the Buddha's enlightenment, then it's a particularly auspicious day to study and practice the Dharma. And on that note, then we here proceed to the heart of Vajrayana practice, is the recognition that our own mind is enlightenment, and there we have to acknowledge that we fail to actually deeply familiarize ourselves and realize this. Even though we might have the instructions, such as all the thoughts that arise are naturally freed in the Dharmakaya, but we don't realize this. This is the unfabricated innate state, but I cannot keep to this. I fail to sustain this. So naturalness is things as they really are, but I have no conviction in this. So we continue to have our likes and dislikes without leaving things as they are. We perpetually think things should be different than what they are. So again, we invoke the teacher. Please think of me. Look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that my mind may or will be spontaneously liberated. So we invoke the teacher then, that we may recognize this absolute innate nature, allowing things to to be what they are and familiarizing ourselves with reality as it is. So then we'll go to the study of Heart of the Buddha. And we're then today looking at Abhisheka. So again, if you haven't been present at this study earlier, I would really warmly recommend to study this particular essay or text. This is you find it in a book called The Heart of the Buddha, and it's a chapter then called Sacred Outlook: The Practice of Vajrayana. It's particularly if you are involved with Vajrayana practice, doing Nundro or doing sadhana practice, if you come across practices such that, so important to really get a clear picture, a clear understanding of what we mean with Vajrayana practice, what we mean with deity, mandala, and so forth. So, so on the left side, actually, we have a picture. This was taken in Lhasa in the 1950s. And you see Dilhukan's Rinpoche and some of his students actually enacting this process that we're describing here, namely Abhisheka. It actually highlights three moments in the life of the student. And interesting, notice this is about the student. It's not about the teacher. The teacher is there to enable the student. But we have then somebody to the left. This, incidentally, is Kenshin Pema Sherab, who's still alive and who still teaches. And if ever you have the opportunity, just recently he was teaching online. One of the really greats of Tibetan scholarship. And there he is actually as a young attendant of Rinpoche, where he then is basically enacting the student who studies. So he's sitting there with some scripture in front of in his lap, a book. And then you see Rinpoche giving an empowerment to a student. And then on the right-hand side, you see the student, a student then, embodying, demonstrating practice. So that's the one in the cotton with the meditation belt and the cotton cloth on the right side. This is the one then who meditates. So basically you study the Dharma, you reflect upon it. And then when it comes to Vajrayana practice, you receive empowerment and then you go and meditate on the empowerment. So that's what we're doing today, Abhisheka. Empowerment, or sometimes called initiation. So, and empowerment, Abhisheka, same thing. Trungpa Rinpoche says, by receiving the Abhisheka of Vajrayana, a student enters the mandala of Vajrayana. Through this process, Vajrayana becomes one's yidam, the embodiment of one's basic being or basic state of mind. Abhisheka, which is Sanskrit, literally means anointment. The Tibetan Oankur means empowerment. The principle of enlightenment is that there is a meeting of the minds of the student and Vajra master, which is the product of devotion. Because the student is able to open fully to the teacher is able to communicate directly to the power and wakefulness of the Vajrayana through the formal ceremony of Abhisheka. In reviewing the history of the Vajrayana transmission in the Karmakaju lineage, the directness of this communication becomes apparent. So Trungpa Rinpoche is now going to go over how this actually has come down in his lineage, which is really wonderful because we're not just talking the theory of it and the principle of it, but we're actually seeing how this has come down to him, how he transmits this to his students. But just to go over the term, Vajrayana, here is the embodiment of awakening in the form of a dancing yogini. As you saw at the beginning of the, I can just go back here, we saw at the beginning of the webinar, this is Vajrayana here. This incidentally is a lake in Pakistan, up in the Swat Valley, that we generally would, when we think of the place called Udayana, we generally think of the Swat Valley. Anyway, Vajrayana as one's yidam, meaning personal deity, as Trungpa Rinpoche was saying last time, as being a good translation of the term yidam. Yidam really also means, literally means the commitment or the truth, or the principle of truth that we cultivate within our mind. So it's also a word that we come across in Mahayana. Really, it's sometimes equivalent to bodhicitta, or resolve to benefit sentient beings. And so on the basis of this anointment, where one is empowered as Vajrayogini, we receive this abhisheka, anointment. It's a bit like when somebody is like the Queen of England, she's installed as the head of state, she's anointed as ruler of the realm. So she's given particular insignia, the orb and the scepter and so forth. Then she is empowered to be this. And this is what she was destined to be. She was born a princess, and she's now being fully installed as being a queen. Likewise, we possess Buddha nature, and the teacher now anoints us as actually taking possession of our true nature. This is what is meant with Wangku. And the true nature is not understood while we have the relationship to the path through the entrance of the yidam. The real yidam, of course, is no other than the one's basic being or basic state of mind. But to fully appreciate this, the Vajrayana methodology includes then relating this in terms of our physical situation, our somatic situation, our body, and also our energetic situation in terms of our energies and subtle aspects of our being. So the path of the Vajrayana is founded on this way of engaging these subtle aspects of our being, or that is then what we would call our subtle body, speech, and mind. And this enables us to completely integrate enlightenment in all aspects of our reality. So we'll look at that. But anyway, this anointment then is the result of something taking place, something magical taking place between the teacher and the student. You could say the teacher is always there, compassionately, but for the student to actually open up to the teacher is what is extraordinary. And that's at this point then that the teacher then can actually transmit something. It's like when we want to explain to something to somebody, and we might have to look for the right moment. People might be caught up in their own drama, and there's no space, there's not a gap. They might not be able to take in something new. You know, you might have some good news that you want to share with somebody, but you actually want them to just calm down a bit before you then share the good news. And so the teacher guides the student through a process, which is what we then refer to as the tantric preliminaries or nundro. It can be like that. It can be sometimes less linear, but regardless, on the basis of some processing of the student, then the student actually wakens up and is open to the teacher, to the degree then that it's not just intellectually being a follower, but genuine devotion is this moment of where the mind stops, where there's a true appreciation of the teacher. You could say it's a bit like love, where there could be a moment of genuine openness between two persons. Very often this becomes clouded over with particular insecurities and so forth. But this moment of a genuine, pure condition of really just appreciation of the other is then what we, in this context here, refer to as devotion or bhakti. And it's in that moment really where the student just is deeply touched by the truth of the teacher, beyond the words, beyond any kind of language or conceptualization, but just profoundly touched by the authenticity, genuineness, truth of the teacher. And that on the basis, not just in terms of I wonder what the teacher is like, but really on the basis of really feeling truthfulness within oneself. And that's where it's a very emotional place. It's where there's tears, there's an experience of being deeply open. And it's at that point then that the relationship enters into something that is beyond just the linear, gradual development, but actually a place where the student has a vision of truth and experience of truth. And that's where then the teacher is then, that's the moment when then the teacher can convey this empowerment. Now we might think of empowerment in terms of the formality, and there is formality, but the formality really is just a way of celebrating this this beautiful phenomenon that's this beautiful moment of openness. So that's where Trungpa Rinpoche says, because the student is able to open fully to the teacher is able to communicate directly the power and wakefulness of the Vajrayana through the formal ceremony of Abhisheka. So it's in this context that then the teacher can introduce the student to something that connects and invokes the student's sanity. You could say the deepest reserve of the student's power, the abiding Buddha nature, is introduced here in the context of the Vajrayana Abhisheka. Of course, we could say, well, I've been to a Abhisheka and nothing much happened. that's fair enough, but nevertheless, you would have noticed that in attending an Abhisheka, then there is a very special ambiance that is created. There's a lot of what we might just perceive as a ritual, but it's not empty ritual. It has so much significance, and it really is about celebrating and highlighting the quality of sanity as it exists within the teacher and within the student. And that's where the Abhisheka is intended for the teacher to empower or celebrate the sanity that the student naturally possesses. So this is something that then has been transmitted since the origins of the particular practice of Vajrayogini down to the present day. So Trungpa Rinpoche says, in reviewing the history of the Vajrayogini transmission in the Karma Kagyu lineage, the directness of this communication becomes apparent. So this being then something that has been transmitted through individuals who have lived this, who have fully realized this, then it comes down to us not just as a cultural legacy, but as a legacy of actual persons who have experienced something and in their compassion have transmitted it to others who are ready for it, who then took this, ran with it, and completely manifested this. So and also there, the lineage, the teachers that have gone before, very significant because they have all gone through what we've gone through. And so we rely on this heritage in terms of a sense of belonging to those who have met the challenges that we are going through and who have worked successfully with them. So that's why we identify with the lineage. It doesn't really matter if they're Tibetan or Indian, but they are persons who worked with, processed the experience of confusion and penetrated confusion and came through, broke through to this this full awakening on the basis of this particular path. So we have a lot in common with these people. We share the same DNA of awakening, and we also share a common practice. We're doing the same thing. We're practicing the Vajrayogini sadhana, and as such, we're doing what has been done for a very, very long time. So Trungpa Rinpoche says, the Vajrayogini sadhana in the Karma Kagyu lineage. The Abhisheka of Vajrayogini is an ancient ceremony which is part of the Vajrayogini sadhana, the manual and liturgy of Vajrayogini practice. There are many sadhanas of Vajrayogini, including those according to Saraha, Nagarjuna, Luipa, Jalandhara, and Shawari. In the Karma Kagyu tradition, one practices the sadhana of Vajrayogini according to the Indian Siddha Tilopa, the forefather of the Kagyu lineage. So we have from the great the Vajrayana masters of India, then various sadhanas of various kinds relating to the different yidams, different, you say, styles of practicing the yoga of sadhana. And this one particularly then comes from someone known as Tilopa. I think he doesn't need further introduction, really. Trungpa anyway will describe him here, but this really is where we regard Tilopa as one of the great siddhas who then is the originator of the Kagyu lineage. So Trungpa says, according to spiritual biographies, after studying the basic Buddhist teaching for many years, Tilopa traveled to Udayana, the home of the Dakinis, or female yidams, to seek Vajrayana transmission. He gained entrance to the palace of the Dakinis and received direct instruction there from Vajrayana herself, who manifested to him as the great queen of the Dakinis. It may be rather perplexing to speak of encountering Vajrayana in anthropomorphic form when she is discussed throughout this article as the essence of egolessness. However, this account of Tilopa's meeting is the traditional story of his encounter with the direct energy and power of Vajrayana. Okay, I'm going to depart from my general policy, which I do occasionally, as you know, but just relating to what Trungpa is saying, and just say a little bit something from my own life experience, which is I went to Pakistan, to the Swat Valley, which is what we generally acknowledge as being this place that we're talking about, Udayana. And what was interesting when I was there, I looked for the lake where Padmasambhava was supposed to have been born, and I looked for various places. I didn't have so much luck. I have friends that claim that they have found the lake and so forth. That's wonderful. But it was certainly extraordinary to travel to this place, which had so many, you could say, how do you say, edifices, and so many archaeological, so many, okay, there were so many ruins in Udayana of old stupas, monasteries, and basically an enormous Buddhist culture that obviously flourished up to the Muslim invasions. But the good thing about the Muslims is that they just buried these places, which is then a haven for archaeology, because these places are basically left as they were, just buried. But while I was there, what was really interesting was people telling me about this phenomenon they called the fairies. And they're a bit like, they were seen as a race of women who lived up in the hills or so forth out beyond, but they were sort of neither of this world nor not of this world. And there was people who had encounters with them. And I won't go into too much detail of all the stories I heard, but it certainly reflects when we hear that Udayana was the land of the Dakinis. And so while we relate to the teacher as the embodiment of enlightenment and so forth, we could also relate really to the idea of some of these yoginis or some of these fairies or these practitioners that are still talked about in Udayana as possibly having been what constituted perhaps the Dakinis that we refer to here in anthropomorphic form, in human form. Just like, for example, the wrathful deities, the big wrathful deities in a way look a bit like we have sumo wrestlers. So, you know, it's there is some connection to say, the actual embodiment within this world. And so certainly when we read Tilopa's story, it is recounted in very real ways, and also Guru Rinpoche and other siddhas that encountered Dakinis, received teachings from the Dakinis, and so on. It's very much recounted in the language of actual persons. Anyway, just to sort of throw that in there as well, as possibly there are some dimensions of this world that we're not familiar with, and without saying anything really, I just basically saying in Udayana people talk about these, what we could well identify as dakinis. Anyway, in the human realm. So, Naropa, from 1016 to 1100, who received the oral transmission of Vajrayana practice from Tilopa, was a great scholar at Nalanda University. Following a visit from a dakini who appeared to him as an old hag, he realized that he had not grasped the inner meaning of the teaching, and he set out to find his guru. There's a beautiful story of Tilopa, who was a very refined, Naropa, who was a very refined scholar, sat one night reading his studying, and there was this goddess that appeared, and he said, she asked him, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, yes, I do. And then she was very beautiful. She made this beautiful dance and was exquisitely beautiful. Her dance beautiful and appearing beautiful. And then she said, have you realized what you're reading there? And Tilopa said, yes, I realized it. And then she turned into this old hag and was just sobbing. And then he, deeply distraught, he asked, why are you sobbing? And she said, well, first you told the truth and now you're lying. You tell the truth that you understand it, which means intellectually, but now you say you realized it. That's not true. And Tilopa was deeply Naropa was deeply touched by what she was saying, and he sort of he asked her desperately, what do you think I should do? And she said, you should go and study with my brother Tilopa out there somewhere. And that's where then Naropa, he right there and then, he, without hesitation, he abandoned his position as dean of what we call the Northern Gate of Nalanda University, and set out to find Tilopa. So then Trungpa Rinpoche continues. After encountering many obstacles, Naropa found Tilopa dressed in beggar's rags, eating fish heads by the side of a lake. In spite of this external appearance, Naropa at once recognized his guru. He remained with him for many years and underwent numerous trials before receiving final empowerment as the holder of his lineage. There's a book, there's the story of Naropa. The only one I think I know of is a translation by Herbert Günther from the 1970s, and it's called The Life and Teaching of Naropa. You should read it. It's an extraordinary, particularly this section here is so incredible. Probably you could pass a bit on Günther's, the translator's own sort of commentary, but the narrative itself is really, really interesting. And the description of the various obstacles that Naropa undergoes before he meets his teacher, the actual event of meeting his teacher, and then what he then went through, apprenticing with his teacher. All of this, an incredible story. So then Trungpa Rinpoche continues, from Naropa, the oral tradition of the Vajrayana practice passed to Mapa, 1012 to 1097, the first Tibetan holder of the lineage. Mapa made 3 journeys from Tibet to India to receive instruction from Naropa. It is said that during his 3rd visit to India, Mapa met Vajrayana in the form of a young maiden. With a crystal hooked knife, she slashed open her belly, and Mapa saw in her belly the mandala of Vajrayana surrounded by a spinning mantra wheel. At that moment, he had a realization of Vajrayana as the co-emergent mother, a principle that will be discussed later. This realization was included in the oral transmission of Vajrayana, which has been passed down to the present day. So we have here then Vajrayana, as painted by Glenn Eddy. And maybe let's just briefly go over this, because this is actually quite important. If at this point we definitely should know that when we talk about Vajrayana and this form of Vajrayana, that everything in the iconography has significance. So I'm just going to quickly read through this. Okay, The iconographical aspect I'll mention first, and then what it's symbolic of. So we have the hook knife, symbolic of cutting neurotic tendencies, also the weapon of non-thought. The skull cup filled with Amrita symbolizes prajna and intoxication of extreme beliefs. Staff, or katwanga, skillful means. The staff is eight-sided, representing the eightfold Aryan path taught by the Buddha. Scarf, this is sitting on the katwanga. The two folds of the scarf represent the inseparability of Mahayana and Vajrayana. Three skulls, the Trikaya principle. The top head is the skull representing Dharmakaya. The middle head is of a putrefying corpse representing Sambhogakaya. And the bottom head is a freshly severed head representing Niyamanakaya. Then we have a Vajrayani's head, a sow's head. It's sort of usually shown over the right ear. This symbolizes Vajra, ignorance or non-thought. Hair streaming upward, the wrath of passion. When Vajrayani's hair hangs loosely on her shoulders, it's a symbol of compassion. Here the emphasis is more on her wrathful aspect. Crown of five skulls, the wisdom of the five Buddha families. Three eyes, knower of the past, present, and future. Also Vajrayani's omniscient vision. Then we have the wrathful expression, clenching her fangs and biting her lower lip, enraged against the Maras. Necklace of freshly severed heads, the 51 samskaras, or mental events, completely liberated in non-thought. One face, all dharmas are of one flavor in Dharmakaya. Bone ornaments, headdress, earrings, necklace, girdle, anklets, and bracelets, perfection of the paramitas of generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation. Two arms, unity of upaya and prajna. Left leg bent and right leg extended, not dwelling in the extremes of samsara and nirvana. Corpse seat, the death of ego. Sun and moon, disc seats only the sun is shown. Sun is the wisdom and moon is compassion. Lotus seat, spontaneous birth of enlightenment. Vajrayani's form, red and blazing with rays of light, symbolizes enraged against the hordes of Maras and very wrathful. Also, she's inseparable from the Great Mother Prajna Paramita. Not shown, necklace of red flowers, which means total non-attachment. So, Mapa gave the oral instructions for the Vajrayani practice to the renowned yogin Milarepa, who lived from 1040 to 1123. He, in turn, transmitted them to Gambopa, a great scholar and practitioner who established the monastic order of the Kagyu. Chief among Gambopa's many disciples were the founders of the 4 great and 8 lesser schools of the Kagyu tradition. The Kama Kagyu, one of the 4 great schools, was founded by Tuzum Khenpa, who lived from 1110 to 1193, the first Karmapa, and a foremost disciple of Gambopa. Since that time, the Kama Kagyu lineage has been headed by a succession of Karmapas, numbering 16 in all. Tuzum Khenpa handed down the oral transmission of the Vajrayani sadhana to Drogon Rechingpa, 1088 to 1158. From him it was passed to Pomdrakpa, who transmitted it to the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi. Karmapakshi passed the Vajrayani transmission to Ujjanpa, who gave it to Rangchung Dorje, the third Karmapa. It was Rangchung Dorje, the third Karmapa, who composed the written form of the sadhana of Vajrayani according to Tilopa and the oral instructions of Mapa, which is still practiced today. It is this sadhana that is the basis for the discussion of the Vajrayani principle. So we have something here that's very real and very precious. It could have been left vague. There could have been something that which, by nature, in the Vajrayani's ultimate nature, is indescribable. It could have been left as something vague. But thanks to it actually being systematized in terms of a form of practice of yoga that engages body and speech, and which is where there's a real heritage of actually instruction, how to actually do this, which initially was, as we can see, was passed down as oral transmission and then eventually written down. We today have something that's very real, very concrete. So this is something that is, and I think words actually fall short of this, but yes, this is wonderful that we actually have something like this in this world. So I'm going to stop at this point today, and we could have some questions, and we could have some questions. Let's see if there's some answers, but you're welcome to ask some questions. Mm-hmm.
One would have to complete the Nundra before starting the Vajrayana sadhana. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the question is, would one have to complete the Nundra before starting Vajrayana sadhana? I mean, the nature of this is not necessarily that linear. And of course, we're all different and so forth. The Nundra is really just intended to facilitate a particular process to take place. So that's where the Nundra precedes the actual Abhisheka, the actual empowerment. But of course, there could be extraordinary moments where we might receive some empowerment, even if we haven't received Nundra, we might not even have begun Nundra, and so on. So these things are never that linear, really. But at the same time, there is a notion of how, the logic of the path, how it works. So that's where Nundra precedes Vajrayana practice formally. And it's generally regarded as something that's indispensable for really engaging in actual Vajrayana practice. So Nundra is really always the prerequisite for practicing something like that, completing the Nundra, yes. Mm-hmm. So today someone started off writing, "May all beings be happy and realize their own Buddha nature." Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What an auspicious photo. Precious Guru and authentic disciples appear in elegant scenery. I come across another disappointment again. Nowadays, lazy and fortunate students like me can only receive the online blessing. Abhisheka is not possible. It seems these days really are degenerate. Well, you know, it's so relevant. It's so relative. At least we can receive it online. That's must look at the half full glass. And there, I think the times might come again where we're hoping that times will come again where we can go and actually meet teachers and receive empowerment in person. Is Tara another name of Vajrayana? Well, we would say yes. We would say Vajrayana is, sometimes we say Vajrayana is the Sambhogakaya and Tara is the Niyamanakaya. So there's different ways of we would say Samatha Bhadri, Prajna Paramita, Vajrayana, Tara, really all the same. What is wrathful passion and Vajra ignorance? Well, we're talking about this is what we were discussing in the five Buddha families, that the real nature of passion is wisdom. The real nature of ignorance is wisdom. And so passion is associated with the Padma family with this discursiveness, how do you say, discernment, the appreciation, which in the confused condition becomes attachment, but in its and discerning. And here then the wrathful, well, this is hard to say, but you could say there would be times when this could be very sort of warm and peaceful and sweet, and there's also a place where it sort of wakes us up. So that's where we could talk about wrathful. But here we're talking about the enlightened aspects. So we're not talking about attachment, we're talking about the enlightened wrathful quality of discernment. And likewise also with Vajra ignorance, which is then non-thought, as Trungpa was saying, the quality of ignorance in its pure condition, this great openness without judgment, that embraces everything. So that abides as an innate, indestructible quality. So I think we can say like that, but I would basically just refer to the discussion of the 5 Buddha families, really, to identify what it means when we talk about the Vajra qualities of particular kleshas, meaning just the wisdom aspect of them. Why is Vajra ignorance the same as non-thought? I thought non-thought was wisdom. Well, I think I've just answered that question. Yeah. So in an ignorance in the Vajra condition, in its innate true nature, is this vast accommodating openness, which is free from any kind of thought of any kind. But when we talk about non-thought, we are talking about then this samadhi in which we sustain the freedom from any kind of conceptual constructs. So this is this very great openness in which ignorance is essentially purified in its own condition. Basically, we awaken to what ignorance truly is through non-thought, and that's where we see in the absence of the obscuration, we see this openness of what we call then the Dharma Dhatu wisdom, or the wisdom nature. Not discussed today, but if time permits, what does it mean for a Vajrayana practitioners to break samaya? We'll actually look at that, but it really just is the discipline of the Vajrayana. So we use different words, like we would talk about how important it is for the monastics to uphold their vows, right? And so similarly, also it's important for the Vajrayana yogis to uphold their vows. Yeah. Wondering, then there's someone saying, wondering if we all experience different kinds of experience from our different sense perceptions from other dimensions, but may not always realize it. Well, that's essentially what we're doing on the path, because we have the abiding innate nature of wisdom. I'm hoping that's what you mean with other dimensions. I mean, we're not talking about sort of, how do you say, what is it Kurt Vonnegut said? Chronosynclastic infundibulum. In his sci-fi novels, and people would sort of pass through these chronosynclastic infundibulums. But if we understand the dimensions that really is the objective of the Buddhist path as then the abiding inner Buddha nature, we would say yes, that's exactly Trungpa Rinpoche's point, actually. Yeah, not UFO stuff. Good. So of course that is again coming back to this discussion of the Buddha families. The Vajrayana perspective is very much this continual recognizing that yes, enlightened experiences are happening all the time. Enlightened nature is continually permeating our reality, and at the end of the day, we would say it has the upper hand. It's really what is more real. So yes, and really that is where the practice of Vajrayogini, the practice of deity, enables us to begin to experience this on the somatic level, in terms of our body, in terms of our energy, and of course, in terms of our mind. So that's where, yes, this is exactly where we're heading with the Vajrayana practice. During an empowerment, I smelled burning, and there was none. My teacher told me it was from another dimension. Yeah, that's more on the. That could more be, that could be more on a within this world, but again, that which we can't see. So it might not necessarily refer to, you could say, an enlightened aspect of enlightenment, but it was more, you could say, within this world, in terms of just there are beings that we can't see. So there might have been some smells that came from that. But we can take it as a good sign, as a blessing, that such a thing happened during empowerment. Could be that there were non-humans that were deeply appreciative of what was going on. Okay, I think we'll end today also because I have to set up for the next program. If some of you want to join, then shoot me a mail, jakob@einstein.org.au. I'll try, because I have to set up a bunch of things, but I'll try to check my email in case some of you have sent me a mail and want to join. So it'll go for about an hour, maybe hour and a half, 2 hours. Let's see. Okay, thank you very much for joining us all here today with this practice. What did I say? Practice? Study. I'm thinking practice right now. Okay, so wonderful you could come. See you next week. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.